It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Well, folks, I had to bring Tricia Judge back on the show. And Tricia Judge, boy, I'll tell you what, she's the one that helps out those folks that help dealers deliver remanufactured cartridges to end users. And I got to tell you, HP's up to their crap again, pushing out the firmware, locking out these remanufactured cartridges. It's a bunch of crap. And you know, I thought we got this solved like 4 or 5 years ago. And I think HP was even on a committee to try to help make all this work out because, you know, HP, they love to talk about how they love the environment. They love to talk about their sustainability, and every chance they get to basically make a customer mad, they do it. You don't want to use our toner? We'll push out a firmware. Trish, how are you doing? It's fantastic to see you again on the big, giant, sharp, interactive board. Why don't you go ahead and tell the audience exactly what you do for the industry, because you are a huge asset, especially to those folks that are trying to help not only their dealer be more profitable, but the end user save actual money.
Well, exactly, Ray. I mean, remanufactured cartridges are good for the environment. They're good for the consumer because they help keep prices low, and they're good for local economies because remanufacturing takes place in across the country here in the United States. So, a remanufactured cartridge is clearly the preferable choice for the environment because 86% of the cartridge is reused. Mm-hmm. Whereas HP touts its recycling program, which means that, it pelletizes its used cartridges, its spent cartridges, and then maybe reuses more than 4% of the plastic in its products. I mean, it's hardly comparable to using remanufactured cartridges. So that said, for more than, actually, I've been at this for 30 years, mm-hmm. but beginning 20 years ago, 10 years ago, EP started looking at a way to make sure that reuse and remanufactured cartridges were touted and promoted as a sustainable alternative. And what EP is the Electronic Product Environmental Assessment Tool. And the GEC runs the program, and once every 10 years, we get together to try to fill the loopholes, particularly this last time around, the loophole that HP crawled through in its claim that it does allow for the use of a remanufactured cartridges, even when it's pushing out this firmware under the auspices of being, a security upgrade. Mm-hmm. And it basically does lock out aftermarket cartridges. It keeps the customer from being able to use a remanufactured cartridge. And on top of that, sometimes even an OEM cartridge if the cartridge is supposedly expired. So it's just a ploy. And then they turn around and tout their environmental programs, which to me are just greenwashing, mm-hmm. because they're totally locking out the most environmentally friendly alternative, the cartridges. So getting back to EP, we just this past year and a half had two committees, and HP was on both of them. And we, argued over the wording of the 8.1.3 criteria, which allows for the reuse of use of remanufactured cartridges. And there's no parsing it here. HP is frustrating that, mm-hmm. and we have brought complaint after complaint to the GEC about this. And so have customers. But,
well, here's what I'll tell you, Tricia. I remember an interview with the old CEO of HP. He's no longer there, where he was talking about a good and a bad customer. I actually brought it up on that gigantic sharp interactive board. So they believe that the customers are bad if they don't use all OEM toner. But here's the reality on this. I don't care how far back you go. The remanufacturing position was about 20% of the supply business. And it just seems to me it's insanity. Let it be 20%. But when you look at HP's revenue, it's absolutely collapsing. Our friends over there at Xerox, they're on Wall Street. HP's on Wall Street. We're seeing a lot of things going on with Xerox stock. And by the way, I did notice that in the HP, the short sellers are ramping up, and they're a little over. They're about 11% now of the float, and Xerox is running about 20 or 30. I think HP is going to start getting some short selling going on, which will drive their stock even down lower. Their revenue has fallen off a cliff. They're about $10 billion off of their peak. And, when you look at their supply business, if you just look at their print business overall from 2018, they're down $4.1 billion. And then keep in mind that in 2018 is when they added the Samsung revenue, which a lot of folks were saying about $2 billion. So they're like all the rest of the actors in the industry. The print volumes are declining. There's pressure on the print industry, which means there's also pressure on our dealer friends, which means that we all have to look at how we can, capture some costs back. And there's no reason why we can't live in a world where we have mixed OEM and non-OEM. It's just ridiculous. It's a big business out there. It helps the dealers, obviously with their profitability. But it just seems to me that all the nonsense greenwashing crap we hear from HP, and then they're just, this whole thing with these, pushing out this firmware crap, and then it's all around this security theater. I believe that, you're right about that. Oh, call it security, and they'll just rip out the cartridge, even if it's an OEM, and put it in a new one. It's just insanity, and it's not helping.
Right.
It's not helping the narrative, because we're probably missing real security threats, focusing on using security to buy a freaking cartridge of toner. It's just insanity to me.
Right.
So
yeah, and I challenge HP to show me one incident where a printer cartridge caused a network to be hacked. It's not. That's not how printer cartridges work.
Yeah,
they don't. They have nothing to do with the network.
You mean you don't put the cartridge in there that's a remanufactured one, and the cartridge doesn't suck all the data inside the cartridge, and then when you reclaim the cartridge, they have a machine they put on the cartridge, they suck all the data out that is I mean, it's just insanity when you think about it. Exactly. And when you say it out loud, it gets even more insane. But
it is. It's ridiculous, and you're right. They're in a full-blown panic over their profitability. I would guess. Obviously, I don't talk to them. However, back in the late 90s, they saw that we as an industry were taking on another OEM for some shady practices that were confusing the customers, and they said they would certainly compete against us fairly, but they would not try to interfere with people's choice of remanufactured over new OEM. And my goodness, how I miss that management team, because they've been replaced by, just gentlemen and women who talk out of both sides of their mouths. Because one is sitting on a panel saying that they promote sustainability and they want to do right by the environment, and then while in the back room, engineers are designing up these firmware updates that totally frustrate that.
Well, it's just amazing. How much does it cost them to do this versus just living with the 20%? I mean, it's just insane to me. And I don't understand how HP just gets away with it. I mean, at the end of the day, I believe a lot of the pressure's coming from Canon. Canon provides HP a crap load of equipment and supplies. And I believe that, as Canon themselves become pressured because HP's, sales aren't keeping up. I mean, Trish, if you look at their consumer printing, the Soho, the little printers they put all over the place, and these are the consumers that get affected by this crap too. They're in their house, they're trying to print something, those that print in their house, and all of a sudden, boom. But their commercial printing on the hardware side is literally down 50% from where it was in 2018. Or actually 2023. From 2023 to 2025, consumer printing hardware is down 50% in revenue. So all this nonsense about, we're selling millions and millions of subscriptions, and that was a whole nother story that caused a lot of problems with people because the subscriptions didn't turn out to be the way they were maybe designed to be. But, I just think that at the end of the day, what the hell? I mean, we're out there looking for a good customer. Yeah, you're a good customer because you do exactly what we tell you to do when you buy our OEM toner, and you never would even think about putting them in remanufactured cartridges. If you do that,
Yeah,
then
and
you're a bad customer.
a bad customer cares about the environment. You know, that's crazy. And a bad customer wants the choice, you know, the freedom to choose what supplies they want to use. Just to even suggest that you might have bad customers, how is that good marketing?
Well, I mean, you might have some bad customers in certain aspects, but you surely don't go on, you know, major news
Right.
outlets and start talking about bad customers. I would tell you that, you know, HP, like the rest of the industry, is definitely going to have some pressure. And, you know, I hopefully that, you know, you and your battle and your team over there can keep them in check. But, you know, this is probably going to be ongoing now forever. Obviously, we thought we really put a lot of this to bed with this firmware pushing out nonsense, but apparently it's back at it.
Well, I'd love to see the GEC and the customers that the EPEAT customers themselves, and they tend to be big government buyers. I mean, the GSA relies on EPEAT and or certainly considers EPEAT in its purchasing arrangements, and they're the biggest consumer on the planet.
Mhm.
So if they started standing up and saying, "We're not going to put up with this," you know, you've claimed that these printers are EPEAT compliant, and yet you're doing the exact opposite in practice. So
Well,
there's got to be a way to send a message up to HP that this is unacceptable. You cannot lie outright to the public and get away with it.
well, I just think it's pretty crazy, and it's not. At the end of the day, I think HP has a lot more things they could be focusing on. One would be a strategy for the company instead of doing stock buybacks. You know, HP spent almost $20 billion buying back their own shares since 2019 through 2025. So
Yeah.
here's a yeah, we're sustainable. We care about the environment. We care about all of our family of employees. But in the meantime, we just spent $20 billion buying back our own shares, which, by the way, were a whole lot more price per share than it is right now, because Xerox's stock's taking a hit too. They're 50% down from where they were at their peak in 2022 of around $40 a share. So it's just amazing to me. But you're going to see the actors in the industry probably get creative, trying to figure out how to make as much money as they can. And I hope in the process that this is a lesson for all of our friends that we got to be careful. There's a slippery slope, and we need to balance, you know, profitability with what we're supposed to be doing that's right for not only our end users, but in the case of a lot of folks in the world, whether you believe it or not, there's a lot of folks in the world that do care about sustainability and environment. And, you know, the remanufacturing industry has provided a source for them to participate in that for a long damn time. You know, so
And in several states, it's a requirement that they buy remanufactured cartridges. We passed those laws back in the late '90s. So, you know, and this is a silly game that we're playing. It's like, you know, you're depicting a industry in turmoil. The entire industry is in turmoil. Instead of fighting these silly, nonsensical greenwashing games, it's like we're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
yeah, it's pretty nuts.
You know,
Pretty nuts.
it is.
Is there anything you want to add before we end this, Trish? What could we?
No. I just hope that that the word gets out there that these firmware upgrades are not good for your printers, and they're not good for the environment, and they're not good for your freedom of choice. So don't accept them.
Well, amen to that, because everybody watching me knows this status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck there, and I'll see y'all tomorrow. Thanks, Trish.